Hello, Robs. We're back with Mara from Be Angry at the Sun and other poems by Robinson Jeffers, 1941. We're reaching the climax of the story. I believe there's only two more segments left, and we are on number 11. There were two women cadging for nickels to play a slot machine. One of them came to Ferguson and said, "Honey, are you as cross as you look?" He gazed a moment at her weak eyes, red mouth, and boneless face. Fairly pretty, but bloated, then without answering, looked over her head and past a half-dozen drinkers to the sunlit door of the barroom at Monterey Bay, sparkling with light, where 100 fishing boats lay at their moorings, and the long curve of beach fainted in a bright haze. A V formation of pelicans was flighting over, and there was something sinister, cheap, and malignant in so much sunlight. This little whore, poor thing, was cleaner. He said, "Are you sick?" "What?" she said. He touched her cheek. "Bloated, bloated, what a pity. You were beautiful before you drowned." She opened her mouth to curse, but remembered the green money she'd seen the cattle buyer paying him. "What's the matter, darling?" "Are you so lonesome?" "Ah," he said. "No, thinking of Finland, that brave race, and they haven't a chance. Courage is the only value left in the world. It must be crushed. It must go through the rock crusher, along with the old stones from Sinai. Drunk, he thought, making speeches to a tart. It might be called degradation. Oh well, there are deeper wells. She sidled her flank to his. "I guess you think too much, honey." He looked over her head. Pleasant waves of brown hair, but that's done in shops. Through the open door at the sun-smitten bay, and saw as clear as reality huge points come up through it, higher than the masts of the purse seiners. The polished tines of enormous antlers. The horny beams of the antlers broke water. The boats pitched and rolled over, sea foamed. The head of a mountain-sized elk came out of the sea, and the wrecked fishing fleet poured from his shoulders. The great split hooves pawed the shoal water. A whirlwind of gulls screamed by the hawks. Ferguson knew perfectly that all was imaginary, and only his mind making a picture of crazy violence. Perhaps it wanted violence. There's plenty of that in the world, and you will work out your case quietly. He looked at the woman's trivial, fat face. She sidled closer to him and said, "I'm thirsty, dear." He said, "That's the salt sea. I never slept with a drowned woman. What do you charge on the seaweed bed under the little swimming fishes?" She patiently, "I wish I could do it for nothing, darling. I got to live." "Yeah, go away and live, then." She looked to the barman for sympathy, and finding none, floated away. Ferguson said, "Wrap me up a pint. I'm going." But as he went to the door, he heard choked laughter. Several people he knew were sitting at one of the little tables watching him, whispering and giggling. Red O'Neill was one. Ferguson's wandering eyes, weary with liquor and lack of sleep, instantly stilled and flared like a hawk's. He went to their table and said, "I did you some wrong a few months ago, Red. I was wrong." O'Neill had pushed back his chair and stood, not knowing what might happen. Sam Barrett sat grinning. Clyde Monahan looked at the table. Mary Monahan made eyes like moons. "Darling, we never see you anymore. We saw your car outside and came in to look for you." Sam Barrett giggled aloud. Mary mooned her dark eyes at him and said to Ferguson, "Who's your fascinating friend?" "A woman, like you," he said carefully. Clyde looked up and said nothing. Ferguson turned to go out. Red O'Neill said, "Go on to hell." Ferguson turned a stone face that looked perfectly controlled, except the abnormal pupils, glassed over coal pits in the pale slits. O'Neill, stepping backward from them, tipped his chair over, but Ferguson said nor did nothing, but turned again and went out, with Mary's laughter on his back. He found on the driver's seat of his car a note scrawled with red lipstick on the blank side of an advertising handbill. "Darling, ask your darling wife who she meets in the shack on Mine Crick. Maybe you know." His unfocused eyes worked up and down the blurred limbs of the letters. They seemed too big to read, and the apes watching, he heard them tittering along the sidewalk. But if he went back, he might in a bull rage kill the wrong person again. He fumbled his pocket for his clasp knife and opened the 4-inch blade. The apes backed into doorways. He folded the paper carefully and sliced it to shreds along the creases. Be careful, never let go, be careful. Is the gear in neutral? Now press the starter, now shift again, drive cautiously. Hurt not a fly till its guilt's proved. What's guilt or innocence? Conventions no more, dying and rotting conventions. My mother, the murderess, my sister, the whore. What are they cooking up behind the pantry door? Cuckolding. Cuckolding up? Never heard of cuckolding. I've heard of cuckolding. Cuckolding up, and they are all innocent, all innocent. The poor man lost one eye peeping through keyholes, and the other in the war, but dear God, give him proof. He'll do what hell requires. Hell? This is hell. I'm driving through it, the dirty larvas and imagos in mummy cases lining the road like a row of fence posts, fire to their knees. He passed the pine wood and fantastic Carmel village, and the artichoke fields. Sea fog was licking the lordly feet of the coast mountains, and a drive of steers on the sea road, their horns and rolling eyes meant something obscenely evil. He worked the car through them and thought, whose herd? I never saw this herd before, nor the Mex drivers. He ran his car into the bank near home and went up to the house. They were sitting at the noon meal. He stood in the doorway, his mother's wiry eyes estimating him, and Fawn's terror-struck sidling. She had been cutting the baby's meat on her plate, and though December, slow flies vultured the table. Alan stood up and said, are you hurt? He said, stooping tall in the doorway like a stilted heron over a stream. Fawn, will you come outside? I want to talk to you. She gripped with both hands her chair seat edges and sighed, and her teeth chattered. Alan said, Bruce, what's the blood? For he'd slashed his hand slicing that paper and had not felt it. Hands, face, and clothes were smeared, the little artery still oozing. Now he saw the stains. What have I done? What was I going to do? And turned and went out. Going down the hill, he saw very clearly two images in his mind. The one of Fawn dead, with a sliced throat, the other of himself, self-hanged. And he must choose. Naturally a decent person, he chose the second and hung by a horsehair hackamore under a beam in the barn. He will now no longer bawl for the truth, though it were poisonous, nor feel 2,000 years of instruction sag underfoot like a rotted floor. Nor will he feel the wind, nor taste the rain, nor see again the great crowning beauty of the year. The southeast storm in the week of Christmas on New Year's, when the wind tugs the roof like a righteous man lifting his unfaithful wife by the hair, from the bed to the door, and under a roaring blue-black sky, the black ocean flames all over with flying white foam, and no bird flies. Nor will Ferguson look up at two gulls flying over the branding fire in the April evening on the knee of the mountain. The young grass is crushed and blood-laked. The calves bawl, the men are tired and brutal. Whiskey is drunk, and in the bluish twilight 2 scythe-winged gulls drift over the reddening beauty of the fire, mewing and stretch down their necks. Then someone looks up and feels a strange thought. It will not be Ferguson, nor will Ferguson hear news of widening wars and deepening disaster, nor of the great retreat from truth and the moral confusions deeper confounded. Did he imagine time could stand still? The cause is far beyond good and evil. Men fight, and their cause is not the cause. There are no angels and no devils. Christ, unopposed, would corrupt all. There was a vast and lovely sundown that evening, soft fire and roses, wine, amber and honey to the heart of heaven, and the sea glassed it with long reflections. 3 herons flew over. Fawn had wept a little, but now she stood with Alan on the hill by the house, her little perfect face glowing in the light, and said, we mustn't blame ourselves, dear, too much. He was insane. If we had not been lovers, he would have been insane for some other reason. I'm sorry for him. Well, dear, he has given us freedom and happiness. And that's all for 11. I wonder what happened to Mara, considering the whole poem is titled after Mara. It's kind of strange that she only made a brief appearance. Anyway, that's all for that, and I will finish this up in about 3 minutes. Goodbye, Babs. Goodbye.